I'm Helen Profiter, Director of Economic Development for Frederick County, and in partnership with the City of Frederick, we're hosting this event on press releases as part of a bigger role of Economic Development Week within the state of Maryland. So if you're not sure what economic development is, I'm not going to spend time talking about it because we're moving on to more important things on press releases. But there's plenty of economic developers probably sitting really close to you. So when we take a break or at the end, just turn to the person beside you and say, do you know what economic development is? And probably they might say yes, and they can answer. So if you are in economic development, just raise your hand so people can see how many economic developers we have. Great.
Awesome.
So we are thrilled to offer this. I want to thank, first off, Sandy Wagerman from the county's Office of Economic Development. Sandy, if you'll give a little wave. Yay to Sandy. This was Sandy's idea. The city and the county have offered a service of PR Web, and I think Michelle Kirshner from the city and Sandy are going to talk about PR Web, so I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but as part of that, writing effective press releases are such an important tool to you all as a business and to economic development, because the better you write about yourselves, the better we're able to sell you in economic development. So we hope that we get outstanding press releases after today. We've certainly gotten great ones in the past, so we hope this ramps it up even further. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about Vivian Laxton, who is our lead facilitator, speaker today. And Vivian came to us several months ago as our first county executive. Jan Gardner hired Vivian as Director of Communications, and we're thrilled to have her. Now I need to look down and do a little bit of a cheat sheet on, I know Vivian, she's super nice, but other than that, I'll tell you about her background. So Vivian came to us in the past. She worked at the Frederick Gazette as the editor and worked for several other local newspapers in the Maryland area for over 13 years. Back in 2004, she did work for one of our neighboring governments, Carroll County government, and she worked with public service and working with media relations. For the past 3.5 years, she's been Director of Public Affairs for the Maryland Insurance Administration, which is the state regulatory agency. She left the state to work here in the county, where she's lived here in Frederick for more than 20 years. Vivian has her master's degree in strategic public relations from George Washington University. And she has a bachelor's degree from none other than Hood College right here. Yay, to Hood. And that degree's in communications. So you see that she has not only the school learnings, but the practical experience to be able to teach this. In addition to working for the county executive, somehow she etches out a couple hours to go back and be adjunct faculty at Hood College, as she serves as a faculty advisor to the college chapter of Public Relations Student Society of America chapter. That's a mouthful. Vivian.
It is.
I'm sure you handle it very well because you're
acronyms.
In the communications, right? So without further ado, let's welcome Vivian.
Thank you so much, Helen. I really appreciate it, especially the nice thing. It's pretty cool. Thank you all for letting me come here today, and I promise I won't take up the entire hour and a half or whatever you have set aside here. The first thing I want to tell you, though, is you've heard Helen and others talk about press releases, and you see on the screen news releases. There is no difference, first of all. I have switched over to calling them news releases because there are very few presses running these days for the audiences we're trying to reach. So it's just recognition of the change in the industry. So I'm going to ask my clicker, Sandy, thank you, to go through here. So what we'll cover today, and I'm not going to read over every single slide. I'm going to use it as a reference point for you. So what is news? What makes something news in the eyes of the media? Because if you know that, then you can give them what they're looking for. When to use a news release, what the elements are of a news release, the parts that you need to make sure you include, how the media use the release, and what does all of this mean for you. So that's what we're going to cover pretty briefly here. And Sandy, already ahead of me. Okay, so what makes something news? It really is subjective. So you've got to compete against what else is going on that day. You've got to try to capture the reporter's attention. So it needs to be something that's unusual or dramatic. Another thing that businesses especially can take advantage of is the fact that newspapers like to localize national events, and television stations as well. So you heard a lot of stuff about the Pope in the last week or two. The News Post ran a story about somebody who crafted an element that was on the stage in DC. That was a local business person who had some connection to an international story. And the media love that because it shows that we're tied in with something bigger than ourselves. So anytime that you can offer a local angle to a national or international event, or even a statewide event, if you can stress that in a news release, you're going to get their attention. And as you know, anything that a VIP does is going to get their attention. Whether they say something good or bad, or do something good or bad, it's going to get attention. Sometimes you have the advantage of a built-in VIP for your business. You know, that might be somebody at your company who also holds an elected job, or somebody who is incredibly active in the community and seen as a leader. So in those cases, you can take advantage of that name recognition, and that's something that the media will recognize as news. Other important elements, what you need to send out needs to be timely. If you send out something that happened 3 months ago, they don't care. So you need to be on the ball, anticipate when something's going to happen, and be prepared to send it out right then when it's relevant. And when I say relevant here on the screen, I'm talking relevance at many levels. It needs to be relevant to the people who you're trying to attract. So why does my reader care? That was the mantra I used to use when I had the reporting staff under me. I'd say, I don't care about anything else in the story. I want your first paragraph to tell me why my readers care about this. I'm going to tell you guys the exact same thing writing your news releases. You need to say up front why anybody should care about what you're telling them. If you can't come up with an answer to that question, you probably need to step back and reconsider whether you want to send a release. Doesn't mean that it's not important to your business. It doesn't mean that it's not crucial to what's going on in your building and to your staff. But if the people you're sending this out to don't have a reason to care, if it's not relevant to their lives, don't waste your time with a news release. And the final item up here, the impact on the medium's audience. And this, I use medium as the singular for media. So you could be sending it to a particular blogger. You could be sending it to a radio station, whomever you have decided to target. They all have very specific people who listen to them or read them. The people who read the Frederick News Post are not necessarily the same people who read the Baltimore Sun or the Washington Post. There may be some overlap, but they're slightly different audiences. The people who listen to WFMD may not be the same people who listen to National Public Radio, right? So you have different audiences. You need to think about that when you're writing the news release. Who am I trying to target with this? Who do I want to reach? Who do I want to know about this? If it's a new product, maybe you're trying to get somebody who's in the customer base you already know. So think strategically, who am I trying to reach with my message? And what kind of impact then will that message have on this audience? So when you sit down to write, that question needs to be at the forefront of what you're doing. Go ahead, Sandy. Make sure I keep up with my notes here. So when are you actually going to use a news release? Well, anytime you have a new product or service, you want to let the world know. I'm assuming that your new product is going to be available for public consumption. Or if you have a trade-specific item, then you may want to send a news release to specific media who deal with that trade. So it might be an industry-specific thing. How many of you guys here are in a very technical field versus retail? Okay, so you may not want to send something out to the general readers of the News Post. You may want to hit a specific group. Catherine, you do HR? And then your IT stuff. So with the IT, you want to make sure that you're reaching a publication that deals with IT, or perhaps it's a blogger who specifically deals with those kinds of issues. So you have to think about who you want to send this to based on the audience. So announcing your new product, your new service, that would actually answer the question, why does my reader care? Because I have something new to sell you, and you might want to buy it because it's pretty cool, right? You may be doing it to add value to a public conversation. So there's, and I wish I knew all the businesses you guys were in, and I apologize, I probably should have started with that. But if there is a discussion being had either at the local level or the state or national level, if your business can provide a perspective on that and you're adding value to the public discussion, then it's worth sending something out. And that gets your name in there. You start getting recognized as an expert in that particular field. And people know that they can turn to you then when they have a question in that field. And this third one is more along the lines for a crisis communications, to present a controlled message, because so often the message that gets played in the media is not what you wanted them to say. So there is a benefit to using a news release as a way to get your message out there unfiltered so that people can hear what you have to say. All right, go ahead, Sandy. So the parts of a news release. I feel like I'm going to be your business writing teacher here for a moment. You're going to have a header at the top. This is the structural parts first. Usually you want to do it on letterhead, because that shows that this is something that the business is behind. It makes it look official, right? So have your logo, however you have your letterhead set up. The letterhead needs to include your website. You always want to have a URL. Have a way for somebody to find more information about you. The release date is the day that you issue your news release. Most of the time, and I would say probably 99% of the time, that's going to be the same day you send it out. There's a very rare occasion when you want to send out one that's called embargoed, and that just means that you're counting on the reporters who receive this to hold it until the day you tell them to. If you have a great relationship with them, they might respect it. If they don't, you've just sent out word a day ahead of time. We'll see what happens. Every news release needs to have the name of someone the reporter can contact. Phone number and email, ways to contact this person. This should not be somebody who is out of the office for the next week on vacation. This should not be somebody whose cell phone just broke and they will be unavailable for the next 24 hours or unreachable. This needs to be somebody who will be right there when you send out the release for the next 2 or 3 hours to take the phone calls. You're basically going to the media saying, please write about me, right? If you say, please write about me, but I'm not going to be there to answer your questions, you've blown your chance, right? So make sure that that is somebody who understands the topic, can speak to the topic, and is available to talk about the topic. And I understand when you're running around running a business, my husband has a sole proprietorship, so he's it. So if something's coming up, when he sends one out, he needs to use his cell phone as his contact number. And that's perfectly legitimate. You may not be in the office right after you send it. You may have to send it and run out the door. I get it. Life is like that. Give them a number that they can reach you wherever you're going to be. Okay? You need to have a headline on your news release. And this should be a headline that kind of sings. It tells the story, condenses the whole thing that you're writing about into less than one sentence. What is your subject and your verb, right? So people don't think of this as a title to a book, which can be just anything. You need a subject and a verb. Who is doing what action? Because that's what's going to capture the eye of the reporters. And then within the body, this is the part everybody focuses on. The stuff above it tends to be forgotten. So that's why I wanted to cover it first, because it really is crucial. If you send something out, you can have the best crafted news release, but if you forget to put contact information, you're out of luck. So for the body, this is the text. And in journalism, you always hear about the 5 W's. The who, what, where, when, and why. And all of that is super important and needs to be up really high in the text, first paragraph if possible. I'm going to recommend that on top of that, you include a how and a wow, because the wow is what's going to get you the coverage. Why is this different? What makes this special? Why does my reader care, right? So be sure when you've drafted your news release that you go back and make sure that each one of these questions has been answered. It's really easy to forget because you're getting caught up in the wording of one sentence or another. And then if you forget to put the date of your event, nobody can come, right? So go back through, have somebody other than you go back through and read it before you issue it, okay? And if you are a one-person shop, like my husband's business, walk away from it. Come back half hour later and read it all over again and see if you've remembered to include each one of these things. So the who is doing the action in this? It's your company, right? Or it might be a person within your company. You might be talking about an award somebody got. What happened? Where is it happening, or where did it happen? Either way. When and why. So why is this going on? Why did you win the award? What did you do that was so special? And how depends on the topic, but that's just a general question that you should make sure you've answered as you go through. And wow, make yourself stand out. You guys are in business. Wow people with your business, right? Go ahead, Sandy. All right, so it helps to know once you've written it what happens next, because then you get an idea of what they're going to do with it. So there are a couple different ways that the media can use your news release. If you're really lucky, the golden crown jewel here is that they assign a reporter and write a story about it. They may never use any of the words that you put in your release, but that's okay, because this is what we call third-party validation. This is somebody other than your business saying, yeah, this is a pretty cool thing that's happening, right? That's what you want. And the story will get played on a better location in the paper or earlier in the broadcast for TV or radio. It will get better play if they've assigned staff to it. Because at that point, the media outlet has vested interest in getting your story out because they've spent staff time on it. So they want that story to get out. That's the ideal. That's what you're shooting for, which is why you have to have that contact information, because they won't do the story unless they've called you, right? Now, here we have running the release word for word. It sounds kind of ridiculous, like this is the lazy way out. I'll tell you that broadcasts and newspapers all across this country are laying off staff right and left. They still have to fill space. They still have airtime to fill. So they may take the easy way out and just take your release if it's well crafted and run it word for word. If it's not well crafted, they're just going to throw it away. But if it sings, if it reads to them like an article, then they're just going to use it because it's so easy for them to do that. And that's wonderful because it gets your message out unfiltered. They might just mention it. They may rework it a little bit and work it into like a section of briefs or just a tiny little calendar of events, but that's okay. I mean, it helps get the word out. It's more than you would have gotten otherwise, right? And a lot of people look for a calendar of events to see what they can do for an upcoming weekend. So if you're sponsoring something, if you have a nonprofit or you have something exciting going on, it's good to be included in there. And then, of course, if it's not well crafted, this is what they're going to do with it. They're just going to delete it, recycle it, it's gone. It never existed. And this happens a lot when you send your news release out by email and you have a really boring subject line. So make sure that what your headline is for your news release is what you use for your subject line, which should make you be more careful about writing your headline too. Think about your inbox. When you come in on a Monday morning and you've got all these unread messages, if you see one that just looks boring, it looks like it's spam, what do you do with it? You're going to delete them too, right? Okay, so you don't want to be that person. You don't want your email to be deleted. Put the wow in your headline and in your subject line to get their attention. Go ahead, Cindy. All right, so this is where I say you guys all have to become reporters. You keep it very clear and concise. News releases typically should be one page. Reporters have a very short attention span. As a former journalist, I can say that about myself. I'm not ragging on anybody else. If we can't get the information we need in one page, it's too complicated. We just don't have time to devote to it. So keep it clear and concise. Don't fill it with all those things about how wonderful you are and it's the best ever and all those lovely superlatives that you may use when you're talking to people about your business. Reporters see it all as a big no-no. For them, they have giant, well-crafted BS filters, and when they see a news release that's filled with it, they don't trust anything in that release. Okay, because you gotta understand, they're dealing with 40, 50 of these a day in a small media environment. When you're looking at national outlets, hundreds a day. So you're competing with all these other news releases. The closer you get your writing to the style they use, you're talking more in their language, the more likely they are to pay attention to it. So if you fill it with exclamation points, they're going to say, I can't take this person seriously, and move on to the next one. In fact, if you don't have a single exclamation point in your news release, that's a good thing, okay? And they really do look through. If they can't believe what they see, then they're just going to question everything. If there's one sentence that stands out to them, where if you say this is the best of the world, then you better be able to back it up with this company or this listing has declared us that, have somebody else saying it rather than you saying it. Okay. Does that make sense? So you're going to write it like a news story. You're going to put the most important thing at the top, because if they run out of room, they're going to cut from the bottom. So you want all of the crucial details that be clear and concise in the very beginning. Worry about your executive's quote later. That comes further down in the release. Because if something's going to get cut, that's what it's going to be. And there are tricks to getting your executives quoted, but we'll go over that another time. Remembering your target audience. So this is what I was touching on early on too. If you're using this PR news service that you're going to hear more about here shortly, they go out on a regional or national scale. They're not the service that you're going to be using to get on FMD, HAG, the News Post. They aren't going to reach those guys. Or if they do, they're going to reach a generic desk. So it'll go to some like news@ email address instead of going to a human being. So if you're using that, that's great, but make sure that the story you're pitching to them has a regional or national interest to it. Don't pitch them something about a small town event that's happening next weekend because they don't care. But if you're doing it for a local outlet, by all means, you should make it local. They don't care about national stuff. So just remember who you're trying to pitch it to. They have different interests. And if you're pitching to a blog, a television station, anything that has a visual element to it, and I'll even throw radio in here now, because radio stations, if you look online, you'll see they have images with everything. Poor radio reporters take their iPhones out, they videotape, they take pictures, they have to do it all. So even newspapers now have video all the time, right? So as much as you can, include a visual element in your story, in your news release. So you may not be able to email it right away. You could just put a note on the bottom saying, video is available at this website or by calling this number, but let them know that there's a visual element. Because not only are you more likely to get play in that media, you're going to get better play because there's a story that runs down the side of the front page and then there's the big package in the middle. What separates those two is the picture, right? So the visual element will get you more space on the page. And it fills more space, so that means that much less that their staff has to write. So for them, it's economic use of resources, right? For you, it's a great way to get your message out there visually, especially, I know we have an artisan in our midst, pictures of your artwork. You know, if you're gonna send out a news release, let me see what you're doing, because that's what's gonna capture the eye of people, right? So as much as possible, include that. Now, don't embed it in the Word file, because it's really hard for them to take it out of the Word file. Do it as a separate attachment, or better yet, if you have the flexibility with your website, load it to your website and tell them how to find it there so they can download it. If you're gonna do it specifically for online, you can do any kind of photo you want. You know, the image quality doesn't matter. If you're doing it for our good folks with the cameras or for a magazine, they need a different level of product. So keep that in mind too. If you're trying to do something in Frederick Magazine, they want glossy, gorgeous pictures that have to be high resolution. So you can send them one as an attachment, or you can say, hey, here's a great opportunity for you to come take one with your professional photographer, which gets you even better play. Because again, the more they invest in what you're doing, the more they want your story to get out there. So it's to your advantage to do that. Anybody have any questions? I think that's my last slide, isn't it, other than my questions? Yeah, sure.
I have a question. Well, going back to the timelines, you mentioned like 3 months might be, too long. But when would you say would be a cutoff point as far as sending out the news release?
Okay, so I'm going to cheat and give you an it depends answer. Most of the time, you want it to be within a day of something happening. So you can announce the launch of your new product within the day that you actually make it available for people. If it's a press release that is weighing in on a regional or national issue, regionally, you want it sooner. Nationally, you may have an extra day built in to your timeline. So it depends on how they're reacting. You know, the first day after something major happens, they're going to be all focused on the events of that. But then the next day, they want follow-up stories. So what can we find that has a local connection the next day? So you have kind of a little buffer built in. The further you are from the story, the more time you have. It's a good question, though. And I'm probably not supposed to be taking questions now. I apologize. Do that at the end if you want. All right. I mean, if you have other ones, I can do it, or I can wait till the end. And I will, oh, Helen.
What are wow kind of statements? Like, in general, if you have a staff member who just got an advancement in their department, how can you take that thing that happens, that you're excited about, but happens in business all the time, and create something wow?
Wow. It's a really good question. So how do you take something that's important, and important to you especially, and make it a little more exciting for everybody else? So what was it that that staff member did that led to them getting elevated? Recently, you guys awarded stuff for the best places to work in Frederick County. And part of that was the wow of, they keep their fridge stocked with beer for their employees. I mean, that was a pretty wow statement. So you take something kind of boring, like, oh, this is a great place to work, and turn it into, I want to work there, right? So something that's a little unusual about it, something that really caught your attention. You know, what was the special project that person worked on that did that? Or did they overcome some obstacle to reach this accomplishment? Because that's always good. Any kind of heart tug you can get is going to add interest to your story. Yes, ma'am. Nowadays, I'd prefer it as an email that links me to the website with it. But a PDF is safe because anybody can open a PDF, but a PDF is awkward because if they're trying to use it to fill space, they want to be able to cut and paste. So that's one reason I try to use a website. I think that's a better option because then they can go and cut and paste from the website, and you haven't filled their inbox with a lot of attachments and things like that. So the more you can do online. I know that's not always feasible for everybody. You don't have time to do it. So send it out both. Send a Word and a PDF version, and that way if they have problems opening, they have the PDF. If they want to cut and paste, they've got the Word version. It's a very good question. Which is also why you got conflicting answers, because they're different needs competing. Yes, ma'am.
So when you're promoting an event,
Mm-hmm.
you have a speaker who has all these credentials. How much do you actually include? And should that be at the end, like you were saying?
Right. So the speaker himself or herself is probably the wow factor at your event. So you want the speaker's name and some sort of description of that person early on. So you want to say, we're featuring so-and-so who's known for doing X, Y, and Z as your first sentence. This event's featuring this person. And then further down, you can put some of the biography of that person. Because if you put too much of that early on, then people get lost and they lose sight of the fact that it's your event that you're actually trying to feature. So you don't want people to forget why you're doing this. So kind of split it up, especially if they're going to cut at the end. So if it's too long for a newspaper or radio to use, make sure you get who they are up front, and then they can afford to lose the bio if they need to.
On that same note, in an event scenario, how early prior to that event should a release go out?
So it will depend on who you're targeting from a media outlet standpoint. If you want your event to be in Frederick Magazine, you need to get it to them 2 months ahead of time because they work a month out, right? So if you want that glossy coverage or you want to be in their calendar of events, you got to think way out for them. If you want it to be in the News Post, probably the week before, unless you want it in the calendar. What do you want to have happen from your news release, right? Do you want it just to be listed in there, or do you want them to come cover it? And usually it's one or the other because they don't have enough staff to do both. So if you want them to come cover it, you have a little more time. You call them up a week ahead of time, hey, let you know I'm doing this. Here are the basic facts of my news release. If you want it to be in their calendar of events, I would add an extra week. If you send it too soon to a media outlet that works on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute cycle, they will forget about it. It will get lost. So that 2 months for Frederick Magazine is ideal for them, worthless for the others. Anything else? Well, if you think of something after Sandy and Michelle do their presentation, I will be here for a little while yet, so I'm going to hand it off to them. Thank you very much.
Hi, I wanted to first of all, I'm going to hold this instead of talk. My name is Michelle Kirshner. I'm with the City of Frederick's Department of Economic Development, and I wanted to thank Vivian for taking some time out today of her schedule and going over this. This is some of the questions we get asked a lot of, and it segues very nicely into a product that we have jointly with the county. So the City of Frederick and the county's Departments of Economic Development together have a product called PR Frederick. And what that is designed to do is to help you get your news out. And so the first thing is what is PR Frederick? What we do is we subscribe to something that's called PR Web, and it is a very highly rated news release service. So what it'll do is take a news release and distribute it further. It allows businesses to distribute releases that could be picked up in many different places, major search engines, news sites, and also they have a list of bloggers and news sources, and also they have an opt-in news list that they send their news to. What it does, and it also they have the RSS subscribers, and then the viewership is really high on that. And the really great thing about it is when we get a news release in from a business who wants to use this service, we can also target it by industry, sometimes by geography, and different things like that. So it really helps to get the word out. One of the great things it does is it'll drive an immediate increase in site traffic. It also helps you get found in more places. So if you're doing a Google search or someone's doing it, it helps with those keywords and those things that you want your business to become known for or found for. And that's where this service will come into, will be able to assist. It'll help boost your business buzz. And in some cases, it can also turn your news into sales by giving you that extra attention. The great news in this is it is free for all Frederick County businesses. It's one of the great benefits that our department can offer to businesses located in the city and in the county. There's no cost to you to submit your news to us for us to distribute. And typically a single usage would be approximately like $259 for you to contract with a service and do this yourself. So we hope that that's something that's helpful as you are, working through the day-to-day of running your business. This is some place where we can help. And the other thing too is we're moving on to how to use it. This gets back to what Vivian was talking about with your audience. So PR Frederick is designed primarily to reach outside of the Frederick market. So you're still going to want to have your contacts at the Frederick News Post, Frederick Magazine, WHAG. A lot of those local contacts send it directly to a reporter that you know who covers a business beat or an industry beat locally that you work with. But this is to help get your news out above and beyond that. So that's really important to keep in mind when you're crafting the press release and when you're deciding what to send to us for distribution to a larger audience and what to send to a local reporter. It is important. There is a format on the back end that we use to once we get your press release and we put it into that, and Sandy's going to go into some more of those details, but it's important to send images and links and video to help you get a little bit more play, like we were talking about. But we have two different ways to do it. If you're in the city of Frederick, we are happy to take that and post it from and handle that administratively. That one is PR Web at cityoffrederick.com. And then if you're outside of the city of Frederick, the county helps to administer that side. And they do PR Frederick at frederickcountymd.gov. There is no wrong door. If you send it to one and not the other, we will make sure it gets out. So there's no wrong door in this situation. The other really great thing that we've heard a lot of great responses about is the analytics that you get from it. So within 30 days, you'll get an email back, and it shows where it's been distributed to, who's picked it up, and basically some of the impressions that it's gotten. So that's very helpful when you're reporting back to whether it's a board of directors or to a manager or someone else in your company to kind of show the effectiveness of what you've just done. And with that, I'm going to turn over some more things to Sandy.
I get the fun part, the do's and the don'ts. So Vivian went over a lot of these already, which is good. PR Web works a little bit differently, like Michelle said. You still want to send it to the News Post. You still want to send it to your traditional newspaper outlets and your other forms of media. But this works online. So we're all about search engine optimization. We're all about increasing site traffic. So keep that in mind when you decide what you're sending where. For PR Frederick, you do want to write a complete press release and not bullet points. And you do want to put it in a Word document as well as maybe a PDF because we do just cut and paste directly. We have staff who look at our press releases and make sure that it's formatted correctly because PR Frederick is the company that we subscribe to. They do maintain the integrity of their product. And by that I mean they control what they put out there. I did hear a story once where somebody put out incorrect information, not by the county, but through PR Web. And so they took that seriously and they changed a lot of their policies. So they do make sure that the press releases need to be crafted correctly, as Vivian went over earlier. Don't use all capitals in the headline. We do get a lot of that, and we have to then take the time to redo it. They won't accept it like that. A good point to note is don't use the word free in the headline. It's great if you're offering a free product, but free is not, it's going to kick it back. And by kicking it back, I mean when our staff submits the press release online, they do have an editor at PR Web who will then go over your press release. And if they see the word free too many times or exclamation points too many times, they will send it back to us and say this needs to be rewritten for whatever reason. And then we have to go back to you and ask you to rewrite it, and that just further delays the process. Avoid writing it in the first person. You want to write it in third person. And another, this is specific to this service, but They will ask for formal permission when you're using somebody else's name. For example, if I'm writing a press release and I quote Bobby, I'm looking at you here, and without his permission, and by that they're going to ask for an email validation that it was okay for me to use Bobby's information, it was okay for me to say that he just came from the City of Frederick Economic Development, and they want to verify all of that information again to keep the integrity of the service. Some ideas for your next press release. We see some really cool stuff. So if you've got a new product line or service, we love to hear about it. And sometimes what we do with these too is if it's something that is like a sale or something that maybe isn't going to, we know that it might be kicked back, we'll email you and say, we're going to put this out on our social media, or we are also going to share this on our blog. So we do use it like that. You might want to spotlight a new product. You might want to celebrate a business anniversary. I think sometimes businesses feel like they don't have news, and you can always create news. I think you can find something great to write about and let everyone know. Also be sure to celebrate awards and recognition, and as Vivian said, the more timely that is, the better chance it's going to have to get out there. So I reached out to some of our frequent subscribers and asked what the service has done for them. And Linganore Wine Cellars is one of our frequent users, and they just opened Red Shedman Farm Brewery last year. So they initiated their first Bluegrass Brew and Barbecue Festival, and so the press release service was able to increase their attendance, and also the News Post, because they did send it to the News Post as well, came out for the day of coverage. They do use it a lot, and we do have a lot of businesses that use it very frequently, and we're happy to do that. Also, another example of how PR Frederick is different from your traditional news release that goes to a newspaper. PR Frederick reaches online journalists. So when you are talking about a company like McClintock Distilling, which is a distilling company in Frederick that our Small Business Development Center has worked with back there, Brandon, when they sent us their press release, they want to reach people who are interested in this type of business. This press release went to bev.net. I had to go on there and Google what that was. But it is the leading online beverage-oriented media company. So that was great for them. We don't know what that is, but they were really happy about it. And then another example of how that works is this particular company is a bioscience company, and they had some new software. So while maybe the News Post wouldn't put that on their front page, this particular release was picked up by the Laboratory Network, which is a digital marketplace for the laboratory industry. So you can see how that gets picked up by specific readers who are interested in that topic. And when our staff goes in and looks at your press release, we target those releases for those industries. So if you send us, if you're in tourism, we will then, there are industry types that we can choose from, and we choose those appropriately based on the type of release that you send us, in hopes that it will get picked up by people who only care about tourism. And that's really it. That's all I have. Any questions? I think we wanted to invite more questions for Vivian or PR Frederick. Jody. That's a great point. The tool that we subscribe to is limited in that, you know, like I mentioned earlier, they really do care about preserving the integrity of their service. So we're not going to be sending them 20 press releases a day. We really filter what is deemed newsworthy and what makes the cut. Our subscription allows us to send one per day, so we do share it with the city. And so sometimes they might have already had 3 releases that day, and so we have to plan those out. So we'll tell you that we do have great communication, and we'll tell you that your press release would be picked up on Monday because we have some other things that were going out that were more timely. We usually can accommodate any requests, but sometimes, you know, a couple of days there, here or there, we do overlap on some news releases that were already going out. But for businesses, there's no limit to the amount of time you can use this. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have some businesses that use it quite frequently, and we're happy to accommodate them. Yes, sir.
Yes. So the tool we're using is called PR Frederick, not PR Web.
Well, yeah, so we call it PR Frederick because the company doesn't particularly want the name of their company out in third party on the web. So we use PR Frederick as a brand because we call that our service. But yeah, there are one and the same thing. PR Frederick is just local to the service that we provide. Anyone can subscribe to PR Web. If you go to prweb.com, you're welcome to do it yourself. You're going to pay. If you are in public relations or marketing or media, chances are you've heard of PR Web and understand the effectiveness of it. But it is costly. So $259 a press release is what the normal person would be charged by going through the service on your own.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is probably an obvious question, but is there a registration process where you provide your company information? What information do you need to provide to do that?
That's a great question. Actually, no, you can just submit it using those email addresses that it should be on the handout as well, the email address. And you don't need to register. We just verify that you're a Frederick County business based on the information in the email that you sent to us. We do only make it available to Frederick County businesses, of course, but that's it to qualify to use the service.
Cindy, one thing I wanted to point out that Vivian was talking about, PR Web has now started to have us immediate verification on email and phone number. So what she was talking about a number that you can be reached at immediately, email address is going to be really important. So don't just list the company's main number with an extension because it's possibly going to delay how long it now is going to take us to get it from
Yeah, they literally just started doing that last week. So Donna and Sharon back here are your two friendly faces who answer your press releases, if you could wave. So when you send it, it goes to them first. And if there are any things that they can identify immediately, they will let you know. But they did just start this process last week, so we're still working through that. I think Donna found a workaround for
Yeah, we've gotten through they're still making us verify email addresses, so if you send me a press release with your email address is in there, PR Web will then reach out to you and say, please verify this, and you have to email back. It's not a big deal. The phone number, on the other hand, is becoming a little bit of a workaround, and I've been on the phone with them, and they have agreed to do it as a case by case, and I haven't told Sharon this yet, but so when we submitted, I just did two for the same company, one Friday and one today, and because I submitted the one on Friday, they verified the phone number today, and because I submitted one right after that for the same company, they said, we've already verified this phone number, we don't need to do it again. But if you're doing it, if we've never heard from you before, and this is your first one, they're gonna have to more than likely call and verify that phone number, and they said, even if we just get a voicemail of you at your desk and it says who you are, that's enough for them. They don't necessarily have to talk to you, but they need to hear either your voicemail or the company, the secretary the secretary answers, and the secretary says, yes, that's a valid number. But like, from what I can figure out, if you've done one, the next time you submit one, we won't have to probably go through that as much. It'll be a little bit quicker.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. I think that's it.